Welcome to Al Jazeera. The shaky ceasefire between rival Hamas and Fatah factions in the Gaza Strip appears to have been broken. We're getting reports that a Fatah activist has been killed in northern Gaza and 3 others were injured. Earlier, President Mahmoud Abbas said that he would go ahead with early elections during a joint press conference with British Prime Minister Tony Blair. John Terrett has this report on the developments so far.
This was the first time Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas had been seen in public since he made his speech on Saturday calling for early elections. Once again, he drove the point home. Fresh presidential and legislative polls are the only way to achieve a unity government and lead to the lifting of Western economic sanctions.
We have also discussed, and I have said, how we have exerted efforts in order to bring about a national unity government, as well as, unfortunately, the fact that they have come to an end. I also explained how I have called for early presidential and parliamentary elections in order for the Palestinian people to say their views based on a political agenda which will achieve the Palestinian wills and wishes.
Mr. Abbas was meeting British Prime Minister Tony Blair in Ramallah. The two discussed ways of bringing about a two-state solution to the wider Middle East conflict. Mr. Blair called on the international community to do more to help the Palestinians and the Israelis achieve it.
If the international community really means what it says about supporting people who share the vision of a two-state solution, who are moderate, who are prepared to shoulder their responsibilities, then now is the time for the international community to respond to the vision that you have set out.
As the two men met, the funerals took place of 2 people killed in violence that flared in response to the call for early elections, something already rejected by the Hamas-led Palestinian government. Nonetheless, the Palestinian Interior Minister, a Hamas representative, was upbeat about the day-old ceasefire.
We congratulate our brothers in Hamas and Fatah on the agreement signed last night under the supervision of the National Follow-up High Committee of National and Islamic Forces. We pray to God that this agreement would last and that all parties would adhere to it to safeguard our national unity and save the shedding of our blood.
The ceasefire, which was announced on Sunday night, held throughout the day until mid-evening, when gunmen killed a Fatah activist and wounded 3 others. Yet another test for the authorities to see who really calls the shots, the politicians or the gunmen. John Terrett, Al Jazeera.
Well, we can go live now to our correspondent Noor O'Day, who's actually in Gaza at the moment. Noor, can you tell us what the latest is there?
Well, we can confirm that one Fatah member has been killed. He's a 24-year-old. The clashes erupted in the northern Gaza Strip, in Jabalia to be exact. We can confirm 7 injuries. 3 of them are reportedly very serious. There's also been abductions and counter-abductions between Fatah and Hamas this evening, which brings into question whether this ceasefire will survive this latest eruption in violence.
Noor, Saeed Sayam, the Interior Minister there, obviously saying earlier in the day he was very happy that both sides had managed to find an agreement for a ceasefire. He'll be very worried if this ceasefire has been broken, because now everything's on shaky ground, isn't it?
It is on a very shaky ground, and Hamas and Fatah, or more specifically the presidency and the cabinet, have continued to exchange blame and react to each other's statements. As of late, the Prime Minister reiterated once again that he rejected the president's call for early elections, calling it unconstitutional and a strategic withdrawal from the political balance in the Palestinian scene. He said the people had said their word, and that we shouldn't be going back and redoing, going back through that process again. Also, the Minister of Interior laid the blame partly on President Abbas, because he accused elements of the security forces that answer to him directly of being influential or taking part in the lawlessness, that was also echoed by the Prime Minister when he asked for the withdrawal of the Presidential Guard from the streets and the Rafah crossing.
There has been this war of words, as you say, Noor, between the President and the Interior Minister about who is in charge of these factions and each of their groups and who can bring peace to the area. Would this now be the right time for them to pick up the phone and speak to each other?
This certainly would be the right time for them to pick up the phone and talk to each other. There's been a lot of efforts and calls from religious leaders and national leaders for such dialogue and for such calm. We know that the Secretary General of the Islamic conferences is coming, Akmaluddin Oghlu, may be coming tomorrow to meet with both the Prime Minister and the President in order to reach some sort of common ground and to stabilize the situation, which all observers view as very dangerous and volatile.
Well, we'll follow events there in Gaza. Noor Uday, thank you for joining us. A spokesman for Somalia's Union of Islamic Courts has said the movement will not attack Ethiopian troops based in the country. The UIC had originally threatened to wage all-out war if Ethiopia did not withdraw its forces before Tuesday. A top EU official is due in Bedoya on Wednesday to hold talks with both sides. The prospect of peace seems relatively small, and neighbouring countries fear they may be drawn into an all-out war if fighting erupts. While Ethiopia backs Somalia's interim government, its neighbour and rival Eritrea is supporting the Islamic courts. But Al Jazeera's Somalia correspondent says tensions on the streets remain high.
What the Islamic Courts Union senior officials are saying is totally different from what people on the ground are feeling. There's a lot of tension in Mogadishu. People are expecting a clash between the Islamic Courts Union officials and the Somali government forces backed by Ethiopia. There has been different interpretations given to the claims and comments coming from the Islamic Courts Union. Some say that what the Islamic Courts Union officials mean is that they won't cross the border to attack Ethiopia in its homeland, but that any Ethiopian government official in Somalia is seen as a legitimate target by the Islamic courts. So far, we don't know what they actually mean, but there is a lot of troop movements. Mosques have been jammed by calls for jihad by the Islamic court officials. Vehicles with loudspeakers blaring from them have been calling people to recruit themselves.
Mohammed Adow there, one of Chad's main rebel leaders, has denied that he's joined forces with the country's government. Mohammed Noor Abdul Karim earlier met President Idris Deby in eastern Chad for talks on the possibility of a return home, according to the president's press service. But government forces and rebel groups have continued fighting in the eastern region for a second week. Al Jazeera's John Cookson reports.
The ongoing war between Chad's government forces and rebels have caused hundreds of deaths, with civilians caught in the crossfire. Burned out vehicles, testimony to the violence still raging. Rebel chiefs belonging to the United Front for Change are denying they've joined the government and were preparing to sign a reconciliation accord with the regime of President Idris Deby.
No, they lost many battles. We captured more than 400 soldiers and killed more than 200. We seized 50 vehicles and burned 70 more.
But Chadian officials not only say the talks took place, but they went well, with the president inviting rebel leader Mohammed Noor back into the fold. It was Noor's forces who carried out a daring raid on Chad's capital 8 months ago. Meanwhile, the rebels say the government is losing its grip.
The government has no control over large areas east to Abbasi and the southern areas.
President Deby is accusing Sudan of backing insurgents fighting against him. John Cookson, Al Jazeera.
President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's political rivals have taken an early lead in key races in Iran's local elections. In the capital city of Tehran, the winners are mostly moderate conservatives who are opposed to the president's more hardline policies. Iran's biggest reformist party said President Ahmadinejad had suffered a decisive defeat. More than 60% of the population turned out to vote. 5 people have been killed by a car bomb in Baghdad. The blast happened at the entrance of a market south of the capital in the mostly Sunni district of Sadiyya. At least 14 people have been injured, according to police. Earlier, another roadside bomb exploded near a market in the Sunni district of Dura, also in southern Baghdad. Gunmen who kidnapped 38 workers in Baghdad on Sunday have released up to 17 of them, according to Red Crescent officials. The employees were apparently unharmed, but the aid organisation has now closed all its offices in the Iraqi capital until further notice. The Red Crescent has appealed to the kidnappers to set free the remaining hostages.